Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're just kicking off the pre-show. I guess we can go to the pre-show timer. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me on this, the third Saturday of the month, which is the normal time for us to get together and do a little chatting and enjoying a little coffee. So that's why we call it the Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. It'll be an opportunity for us to cover all the big numbers from Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy, so we can kind of get that 10,000-foot view. This is an opportunity for you to ask any other questions. And, anywhere during the live chat, you can feel free to ask any questions that you might have. I've got some great statistical tools here that we could take a look at if you want to ask some questions about areas outside of our local area. So happy to answer any of those questions for you. We've definitely got some interesting topics to hit today. It's definitely an interesting twist on what we usually see at this time of year. So we can chat about that stuff as well. In the meantime, I'm going to take a second here and just make sure we're going. And it looks like we are.
Happy to answer any of those questions for you.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay, but hey. That's weird. All right. It's not letting me preview it as it usually does, but let me just manually do that. I hope y'all been having a great March. Let's see. All right. It looks like maybe LinkedIn isn't happening. Let's look on X and see what's going on there. And there we are. So we're up and running on X, which is great. And we're up on Facebook. For those of you who might be joining me for the first time, let's see here. You can feel free to chat to me. The chat will appear on the screen here somewhere, maybe over here, so that everyone can see, even if you're not on the platform. So if you comment on Facebook and someone comments on YouTube, those will both get pushed into that. So you will be able to see the question. But also I can obviously see the questions that get asked, and I'll just repeat that question and when I provide the answer. So it's a real easy way to chime in with any information or data or questions or whatever that you might be interested in learning more about. So we've got about 11 and a half minutes until we're going to kick off the show for real. I can see I've got 2 people here in the pre-show. So feel free to ask any questions you might have. I'd be happy to answer them now. In terms of interesting stuff, so, this is totally not a real estate thing, but some of you might be aware of a supplement, I guess we can call it a supplement that you can take. I think it's called ethylene blue. And it was used to dye jeans, but in the 40s, I guess, or maybe the 30s, it was found to have medicinal properties in terms of antibacterial or stuff. Anyone who served in World War II apparently is going to be familiar with this one. I guess mostly if you served in the Pacific. But I thought, what the heck? I read some of what it was supposed to be about and thought I'd give it a shot, and forgot that one of the side effects of this particular supplement is that it turns your urine blue. So when I went to do my morning business today, man, this is not the high value, high click subject matter, I think, for something like this. But anyway, when I went in there, and I had completely forgotten I'd taken this supplement, and went in there and did my morning business, you can imagine my surprise when that particular side effect was proven to be a real thing. We're just about 10 minutes away from kicking off. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker in Santa Clara County and realtor. and I have been since 1988. So I've been doing this a very long time. Started in the Mountain View, Palo Alto area. And over the years, I've lived in or done business in everywhere from the peninsula, that direction, all the way down to Santa Cruz, all the way down here to Gilroy. Went local boy. Went to Blue Hills Elementary School and went to Lynbrook High School. Went to Miller Junior High, which I guess isn't called Miller Junior High anymore. Is it middle school? Miller Middle School. So just and then went to San Jose State. So very much born, bred, and raised in Silicon Valley. Something's complaining about keyframe interval. I think we're all right, though. It looks like things have settled down on the mainstream here. That's a little bizarre. All right. Unfortunately, I can't change keyframe interval on the fly, and I don't want to end the stream because I don't want Facebook to just go, nope, no more stream, it's over. I've done that before, and it was a bad thing. I hope y'all have some great plans for the weekend. My son was here for spring break. For those of you who've been following me for a while, you know that he's going to law school in Texas and flew back for the week. So it was really great to have him back home. Yeah, just super proud of all three of my boys. They're all doing great. One works for Google, one works for Ernst & Young, and so they're out there making stuff happen. And happy to see them kind of making their way. In terms of other stuff going on, is there anything interesting? I think that we're going to see some interesting numbers, some numbers that defy past years in terms of what has become normal. We can also take a minute. I think one of the things, did I save that article? I'm not sure I did. We can talk about weekly mortgage rates, that type of thing. We're in a pretty good place right now in terms of rates. They appear to be heading the right direction, or a good direction for buyers to be able to get the most out of their purchase. So I think that's a good thing. We're going to see some very interesting numbers as it relates to the homes sold numbers. I actually ended up running them twice because I was shocked to see this change. And then, of course, we can also talk about the very bizarre contradiction in some of these numbers, right? Where we can talk about how much over or under asking price people are getting. And maybe try to figure out where the balance is there, right? And we can also see what the folks at ReVenture think is happening with our local markets. And I'm an unshaven Saturday morning. And now that I see myself on camera, I'm thinking that was a mistake. I don't particularly like it. So my bad, I guess. We're about 6 minutes away from kicking it off. Keeping an eye on the chat. So if anybody wants to ask a question, feel free. I did get a interesting message from a client, a past client, who apparently subscribes to some of the same lists I do in terms of real estate news, but was really concerned about an article that came out from ATTOM. They're Atom Data. They're one of the most respected data folks out there for real estate. And the headline was California, Illinois, Florida, and New York City area lead housing markets facing greater risk of downturns. So I figured we could talk about that. Once you get into the nitty gritty of it, it's an interesting one to consider, particularly for somebody who lives in Santa Clara County or in Silicon Valley. Just creeping up now in 5 minutes till we kick things off. I want to thank you again for spending your valuable time with me. Hopefully my goal here is always to leave you with more value on the table than I take up in your time, and I hope we accomplish that today through giving you some interesting insights into our local markets. And if necessary, we can even chat about, one thing I can do is I can pull up my MLS access. So if somebody wants to do like a real MLS live search right here, we can do that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Not seeing anything in the chat yet. I see a few people who've tuned in. I think we're up to, there's one over on, it looks like we've got a couple over on YouTube. And one on, is that one on Facebook? Looks like one on Facebook. So feel free, ask any questions. Any topics you might want us to cover during the show today? Always happy to try and help with your specific scenario. I also had someone ask if I would do a community thing on X one of these days. I'm happy to do it. I don't have any problem doing it. I just wasn't sure how many folks in that environment were going to be interested in that. But if there's enough, I'm totally fine with doing it. All right, just about 3 minutes away from starting things off here. Noelle is asking, she's looking to purchase an off-market property in the Bay Area up to $2 million. Do you or any out there know of any? Noelle, I appreciate that. And you know what? Most real estate agents for off-market properties have relationships with investors that they will frequently share those with. You know, there are other ways to go about it too. If you're interested in maybe going a little bit unconventional, and I'll be honest with you, I think unconventional is probably one of the best ways to achieve your goals. If you follow the same rat through the maze every single time, right, you're only going to be where other rats have been. You're going to be walking in the footsteps of others. Back when things were really, really nuts, and it was a scenario not only where you would go in and there'd be very few homes to choose from. You'd go in there and you'd be competing with 20 other offers, right? And people would be coming in 100, 200, 300,000 over asking price. One method that I was using with clients during that time was doing direct contacts. So like in your case, figure out what exactly you want. And not just bedrooms and baths and square footage and all those types of things, but also areas, right? Right down to specific streets. Then what you can do is you can work with your agent to create a mailing list of folks. And you know, the other side is to make it a little bit more personal. You can do a direct mail. I think trying to email those folks is a tough one. You can often subscribe to services that will get you an email address for someone who lives at a certain address. You know, and that may have a certain level of success, but I wouldn't do it. I don't think that's a high win scenario. But if it were me doing it, I would actually end up creating things to drop off at people's homes, meaning something to hang on their doorknob. Mix it with a direct mail piece and a little bit of walking around in those neighborhoods and see if anyone's willing to bite. You know, you'd be amazed at how many people don't want to go through talking to a real estate agent about what they have to do and all the maintenance and cleanup and painting and all that kind of stuff. And you can end up saving yourself a good amount of money. And since you're specifically interested in rehabs, if you drive neighborhoods of homes that look like they're in rundown shape, if you find let's say you go into a neighborhood of $2 million homes and you drive down the street and you're able to spot 4 or 5 homes that clearly have deferred maintenance or unmaintained yards, it's going to be super easy through a real estate agent. Give them the address. They can give you the contact information, the mailing information for the owner of record, and you can go on from there. So I think that's, you know, I would go a little bit unconventional on that. I think right now it's a little easier to do, but getting the off-market stuff is tougher. But hopefully those suggestions will either inspire you to come up with an even better idea or help you. All right, folks, it is officially 10 a.m. on the third Saturday of the month, and that is a clear indication it's time for the Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. My name's Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in Santa Clara County. I'm also a realtor. Been doing this since 1988, so it's been a while. And the goal today is to share with you all the latest market information that we've got on our local markets. And I start with Santa Clara County and then drill down to San Jose, which is the largest city in Santa Clara County, and then go to Morgan Hill just because I like Morgan Hill and I live here. And then we go to Gilroy for that. So we sort of just go through different sizes of communities starting at the top. And obviously the data that you can hang your hat on in terms of getting a feeling for the overall move of the market is going to be Santa Clara County because it's the largest sample size. And for those of you who don't remember your old high school statistics class, more data means more accurate results. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in and get this stuff going. Let me just find my screen here. As you can see, the little Restream IO thing pops up in the corner there. That's going to be where folks' chats come up once we get going. I think the one exception to that is if you're on Facebook, your chat won't show up there. But it will show up. You're obviously, since Noelle approached me from Facebook, I'll see it and I'll share her question and then provide the answer for you at that point. So, all right. So let's go ahead and take a look at. Let's do this one just so my ugly face isn't blocking any of the data. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump in, and we're going to cover the data here for February. And I did it again. I didn't change the years. So I did this last month. What an idiot. So that isn't 2023 and 2024. That's 2024 and 2025. I could have sworn I changed that. I thought I did a search and replace on all of that, but I'm wondering if that version's on my laptop and not on my desktop computer. So I apologize for that, the second month in a row. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. This is going to be the total homes on market. So think of this as the supply number. If you're a buyer, these are the number of homes you had to choose from in the month of February. You bet, Noelle. Happy to help. We can talk about it more later on if you like, if you want to jump off of any of those suggestions I made before we started. So anyway, if you're a buyer, this is your inventory number that you have to choose. You walk into the target of houses, and this is how many houses were on the shelves for you to buy. If you're a seller, this is how much competition you had to sell your home. Now in Santa Clara County, and I want you to keep these numbers in mind as we go, because we're going to juxtapose these to some later numbers that I think are a little creepy or a little indications of things yet to come. But we had a 60% increase in the total inventory in Santa Clara County. That is huge. We had 983 homes on the market last year in February, and we have 1,568 this year in February. So a huge jump. An even bigger jump in San Jose to the tune of 63%, where we had 432 homes last year, 706 homes this year. Morgan Hill, now granted, you're going to get a lot more margin of error and variability as we go into smaller communities, Morgan Hill and Gilroy particularly so, because we literally have like dozens of data points rather than hundreds of data points or thousands. But it's 129% up from last year. It was 34 last year, 78 this year. A very interesting mix of price levels in that. And this kind of weird trend has been going for about the last year in Morgan Hill, where we've seen sort of not just increases in inventory, but also lackluster performance at weird price points where the price banding moves. In Gilroy, up 33%, 54 homes last year, 72 homes this year. And again, we're going to see some numbers up here coming up that I think are super interesting relating to these. So let's go ahead and jump to the next ones, which are total number of homes sold. No, I'm sorry, new listings. Ugh, what am I thinking? So these are the homes that were listed. So when we say new listings, what we're talking about is in this month, a home was entered into the multiple listing service by a real estate agent. So the number of sellers who wanted to go onto the market. So these are obviously all numbers that contribute to the overall inventory. In Santa Clara County, that number jumped 46%, 1,131 last year, 1,646 this year. San Jose up 42%, 548 last year, 776 this year. Morgan Hill, 42 last year, 60 this year, for a net increase of 43%. And Gilroy had 48 homes last year and 69 homes this year, for a 44% increase. So across the board, a pretty consistent amount of jump in the total number of sellers. But this is a mentality thing, right? Because this indicates an increased willingness on the part of sellers to put their properties on the market. And I like to get a feeling of why that is. It's particularly interesting when I talk to folks who list about what they're going to do when they sell. And something I think I've mentioned on past shows is the biggest change I've seen over the last 10 to 20 years is the number of folks who are leaving the state entirely. Back when I first got into the business in '88, all the way up until the early 2000s, for folks for whom I would list a home, they were frequently not just staying in the state, but staying in the county and downsizing or upsizing. They weren't leaving. Now that's completely flipped. I'd say about 80% of the folks I talk to are looking to get out of the state, which is another interesting number, particularly when you take into account some of the other things going on relating to businesses that are moving out of the state, that type of thing. Next, let's talk about total number of homes sold. And when we do talk about total number of homes sold, another little side number I like to include in that is, what was the net effect relating to listings and inventory? Meaning, did we add to the inventory or did we subtract from the inventory? And we'll obviously be making that pretty obvious here in a minute. Now remember, this is the homes sold number. Look at how small those changes are, particularly at the Santa Clara County level. Just to remind you, active listings increased 60% in the county, in Santa Clara County. Yet homes selling decreased by 1%. So those are two numbers that, when looked at as a whole, point to nothing but increasing inventory, right? Does that not make sense? If you're selling fewer homes in this month than a year ago, and you're adding more homes this month than a year ago, that indicates we're going to see an accumulation of inventory. So again, down by 1%. San Jose down by even more, down by 6%. 393 last year, 368 this year. Morgan Hill up 25%. 24 last year, 30 this year. And then Gilroy down 30%. 27 homes last year, 19 homes this year. So let's go ahead and do a quick rundown. In every case, we added to inventory. There was no case in any of these areas that we check that we sold more homes than we listed, which indicates obviously a net increase in inventory. In Santa Clara County, that was an overall increase of 957 homes. In San Jose, it was an increase of 408 homes. In Morgan Hill, it was an increase of 30 homes. And in Gilroy, it was an increase in 50 homes. And remember, it wasn't that long ago. It was just a couple of years ago where we would see that at this time of year, we were selling more homes than we were listing. Right? So if we listed 50 homes in the month, there were past months where we were seeing 60 homes were actually getting sold, indicating we were selling everything that was coming on the market, plus dipping into the existing inventory that might have been sitting on the market for a while. I find that interesting. There's something else we're going to see here in terms of days on market that I don't think it's too much of a stretch, but we'll talk about it when we get there. So we'll see if you agree with me when we get there. Next, we're going to talk about months of inventory. And to think about this, imagine we froze the statistics for February. In other words, we freeze the inventory numbers of February and we freeze the homes sold number for February. How long would it then take us if we sold that same number of homes every month? How long would it take us to sell off all the inventory in February? A balanced market, typically nationally, if you're talking to folks about what is a balanced market in terms of months of inventory, it's usually 4.5 months. Now, granted, we're not, aside from Gilroy, we're not anywhere near, quote unquote, a balanced market, but look at where we are. In Santa Clara County, a year ago, it was 1.4 months of inventory on hand. 2.3 months this year for a 64% increase. That is huge. In San Jose, it was up 73%, 1.1 months of inventory last year and 1.9 months this year. Morgan Hill up 86%, 1.4 this year, 1.4 last year, 2.6 this year. Gilroy, 2 months of inventory last year, 3.8, almost 4 months of inventory, really creeping up on the tipping point between being a seller's market and a buyer's market in terms of how this number is interpreted. I think this is very interesting, again, given what we're going to see here in a couple of minutes, because there does seem to be a bit of a contradiction in these numbers, but we'll get to it and see if we can't suss it out here in a minute. Next, let's talk about homes pending or contingent. So this is a future telling number. This number will tell us how many homes are going to be sold within the next month or so, right? Because what this indicates is an agent went into the MLS and changed the status from active to contingent or pending, meaning they accepted an offer. And once you accept an offer, it usually takes 30 to 45 days for escrow to close. That's so the inspections can happen and the lenders get all their paperwork all lined up and get signatures on everything. So this should be an indicator of what we expect from sales in March. Now, if you remember the last time we spoke in February, the pendings were up a bit, but they weren't up as much as you would expect for what we would see in this time of year, if I recall correctly. But let's just go ahead and take a look at where we're at. So we're up 12% from last year. 870 last year, 977 this year. But again, in your mind, does that increase in sales activity in terms of pendings, does that overshadow the huge discrepancy between homes sold and active listings? In my head, it doesn't. Just to remind you, inventory is up 60%. New listings up 46%. Homes sold down 1%. And the number of pendings is only up 12% from the same time last year. And that's true of all of these numbers I'm sharing with you right now. This is all year over year. That way we're not worried about seasonal influences, right? Because a December is very different from a February or a March, right? Or a June or a July is very different from any other time of year. So this way we're eliminating any other weird influences. Always beware of data that is being tracked on a month-to-month or a week-to-week basis, which is the way most do it. It's usually not horribly mysterious. I mean, with interest rates, for instance, I mean, when interest rates go down, people get more loans. When interest rates go up, people get fewer loans. It's not a real rocket science equation. You're not being asked to find the area under the curve. So, okay. Anyway, San Jose up 8%, 459 homes last year, went pending, 498 this year. In Morgan Hill, it was down 12%. So we had fewer accepted offers in the month of February. 34 last year, 30 this year. Up 35% in Gilroy. 26 homes went into contract last year and 35 went in this year. So I would describe this as relatively lackluster. I wouldn't call this a big event one direction or another versus the other stuff like the new listings, the active listings, the homes sold. All of those numbers I consider to be more dramatic. So it's interesting to see that we will not see as much growth in sales as we would normally expect to see at this time of year, given past year's performance. All right. Next, we're going to take a look at average original list price. And average original list price is one that I don't know of many other folks that, oh, look at that. We got 3 more folks on YouTube. Welcome to the Coffee and Real Estate live chat. Feel free to ask any questions. This is a look into the mind of a seller, right? Because when I say original list price, I mean the day they sat down with a real estate agent or the day they entered the for sale by owner on Zillow or whatever. This is this wouldn't include that. This only includes MLS data. So it's going to be only folks who work with a real estate agent. This is the number that in their head they thought they should get for the house. And it's the very first number that went into the multiple listing service. So this is a complete measurement of seller expectations. Not what they got, just what their expectations are when they listed the home for sale. Now, in Santa Clara County was up 7.7%. Last year at this time, $1,972,000 was the average list price, original list price. This year, 2,124,000 was the average list price. In San Jose, it was up 3.2%. Last year, it was 1,453,000. This year, 1,500,000. In Morgan Hill, up 1.7%, 1,660,000 last year, 1,689,000 this year. In Gilroy, we saw 1,343,000 as the average list price last year, and this year it's 1,367,000 for an increase of 1.8%. So expectations are a little high in the county in general, in terms of what folks are expecting to get. As for those of you who've been watching this live chat for a longer period of time, you know that there have absolutely been times in history where these were, in some cases, double digits, where the average list price would be 10%, 15%. I think our peak was 18% at some point a few years back. But this is all geared towards what's the mentality of the seller at the time that they listed the home. Next, let's talk about average sales price. This is what homes actually sold for, and we're going to do a delta here. What was the difference between what they got in February versus what they were hoping for in February, right? All right. So, and these numbers are nuts. Because think about what we've already discussed. We have a big jump in active listings. We have a big jump in new listings, 60% and 46%, right? We have a drop in the total number of homes sold, fewer homes getting sold. We have months of inventory increasing. So another indicator that the market is supposed to be shifting. But look at how much higher homes are selling for. And when we take a look at the percent over and under list price, that's going to blow you away too, because these two separate pieces of data seem to be contradictory. So in Santa Clara County, last year, 1,696,000. This year, 1,961,000. We're not quite to the peak. I think the peak of average of homes sold in Santa Clara County, I think it peaked at 2.1 million, but it's a 15.6% increase from the same time last year. San Jose, 16.7% increase, 1,352,000 last year, 1,578,000 this year. Morgan Hill up 23.4%. And remember, while this number is accurate given the data that's available, it's also skewed a little bit because we had some homes in the higher price range that sold in Morgan Hill for the month. But anyway, 1,259,000 last year, 1,553,000 this year, 22% increase, 22.2% increase in Gilroy, 1,075,000 last year, 1,313,000 this year. And remember, these are actual solds. This is what folks on average paid for a house in these various areas. So now let's sort of suss that out. In terms of expectations for Santa Clara County, despite the fact that number went so freaking high, it's still below what expectations were. Remember, expectations were 2,124,000, which gives us sellers on average missing their goal by $162,887. Now, San Jose, on the other hand, exceeded expectations on sales. So the average home listed for sale for $1.5 million in San Jose, but sold for $1,578,000, and that is basically $77,146 over what their list price was, what they expected to get. In Morgan Hill, this number gets even more crazy. So we missed expectations. In other words, sellers got on average $135,658 below what they wanted to get. And in Gilroy, again, also coming in below expectations, sellers were getting $53,990 below their expected number. So definitely a disconnect. Not the worst disconnect we've ever seen in terms of what sellers want versus what sellers are getting. In fact, what sellers are getting, I think, the fact that we've got in the county overall a 15.6% increase in the average sales price actually blows me away. Particularly given the other data that we've seen that would indicate the market should be slowing a bit in those areas. All right, next we're going to take a look at percent over under asking price. And we can see a dramatic increase. If we were to look at just this, we would assume low inventory. We would assume high numbers of homes sold. But obviously that's not what we saw. So I consider this a bit contradictory. Last year, and just to sort of give you the calibration here, if you got 105.9% of your asking price, that basically means you got 5.9% over asking price, right? Which is a huge chunk of change. That's a 1.6% overall increase from the same time last year, where this year we're seeing 107.5. So in February of 2025, the average home sold for 7.5% over asking price. Absolutely nuts. In San Jose, we saw a 1% increase. Last year, 106.1 or 6.1% over asking price. In February of this year, 7.1% over asking price. Morgan Hill was actually down 0.4%, 102% or 2% over asking price last year, 101.6 this year. That's actually a pretty normal Morgan Hill thing in general. Sellers in Morgan Hill tend to overestimate the value of their home, which then tends to get reflected in both price reductions down the road when the home doesn't sell, if it doesn't sell, but then also taking below asking price. That's been a Morgan Hill thing now for a while. Gilroy up 0.8%. They were 101.8 or 1.8% over asking price on average last year. 102.6, so 2.6% over asking price on average in 2025 February. Let's see. I don't have any more data on that, but yeah. So that's where we're at, and that's actually pretty stunning when you consider the other data that we've looked at. Okay, next let's talk about days on market. And this one's interesting too. So days on market is down by 18%. So it was 22 days to get a home sold last year and 18 days to get a home sold this year. In San Jose, no change across the board. It was taking 19 days last year and it's taking 19 days this year. Morgan Hill's up 12%, 25 days last year, 28 days this year. And Gilroy's up 15%, 26 days last year, 30 days this year. So where do we go with this? Given the amount over asking price, right, that folks are getting, for instance, indicates a higher level of activity where I would assume that these would be lower. Now, here's something to think about. Once you get down to about 18 days in Santa Clara County, that's kind of to the point where I wouldn't consider that a real number. Meaning, as a real estate agent, if you list someone's home for sale, you will typically put into the listing, we will not look at offers until such and such a date. I know I do this all the time because I want to have 2 weekends of open houses before I accept any offers. I want to get as many eyeballs on the house as possible. Eyeballs equals offers, right? So if I'm trying to get as many offers for my client as I can, then the smart move is to have it out in front of people for as long as possible. Now, I do a thing where all of my marketing hits on the day that the thing lists, right? So my direct mail, my digital advertising, my specialized advertising, which will depend on the house, right? For instance, I had a house that was right up against a hiking trail, so I pinged a whole bunch of local clubs and organizations relating to hiking and biking and all that kind of stuff. So all of that stuff hits at the same time. And I want that to penetrate enough so that I get people who are interested enough to do a drive-by, and then after doing the drive-by, interested enough to coming to an open house or arranging for a viewing. So typically that 18 days would very easily statistically fall into that range that you would see delayed between day listed and day sold. It's normally not more than, it's usually 10 to 14 days. So it's a few days over that threshold, but still indicative of decent activity in terms of how fast homes are selling. Same thing goes for San Jose, definitely not in Morgan Hill and Gilroy. The data for those two areas indicates, yeah, for real, sellers are just having to wait until the right buyer comes along for that property. Let's see here next. Now now we have switched gears, right? We are no longer looking a year ago. We're not looking year over year. We're looking month over month, just so that we can get a handle on trends that are happening in the shorter term. Now, this first one is total number of active listings, and the red bars indicate same month past 2 years, so that way you can see what was the trend then, what happened then, and what should we expect now. You can see almost the same general trend. I'm going to suggest you kind of ignore 2023 because remember, that was in March of 2022. is when we had the interest rates go nuts. And so, they steadily got nuts as we got further into the year. So at the end of the year, I think we had the peak at the end of 2022, maybe beginning of 2023. So weird interest rate things would be influencing numbers back then. But you can see we had a bit of a dip in February in total active listings, which would indicate an increase in sales, right? So that may have actually, what that may reflect is a moment where we finally got some decent interest rate news, where the interest rates went down a little bit. But then if you look at 2024, you can see from December to February a big ramp up, and we see the exact same thing now. And then last year we saw a flattening between February and March, and then we saw the market sort of take off in terms of homes sold. But look at how much of a higher level we're at in terms of total active listings. I think that if you look at February of last year and you see the trend leading up to it is a similar shape in terms of the ramp up, just look how much higher we are in total inventory. Now, a ramp up like that and what we normally would expect to happen from here on, because as you can see from 2024, the peak of inventory is typically happening in May through to September. And if we see a similar performance this year, given what we're seeing this month, those inventory numbers that we're going to get for 2025 are going to be way up there. If we see this same relative performance, where this is where we are last year in February and this is where we are this year in February, we can expect to see, once we get to say like May, inventory numbers like way up here, right? Now, at some point, there's a balancing act that goes on, right, between total number of buyers in the market and total number of homes for sale in the market. What we're seeing right now indicates that there is still enough of a demand for homes out there that we're getting multiple offers that boost the amount over asking price, right? Well, at some point we're going to hit an equilibrium where the inventory available and the buyers hit an equilibrium. And if things continue the way we're seeing, it wouldn't surprise me if inventory then exceeds the demand of buyers. And then that's when you would start to see softening in things like amount over asking price, right? Because if you have fewer homes that are being sold with multiple offers, less likelihood you're going to pay above asking price for that property. So I think this is very interesting data. I think where we are blows me away, because these are inventory numbers that are on par with October of last year. And then, August, and what month is that? That's May. But then it exceeds the inventory levels of any time in 2023. And then we'd have to go all the way back to 2022 in October to see a hit of the same inventory numbers. So if I had to project, if I'm going to gaze into my crystal ball for everybody, huge inventory. Well, I just hope that didn't hurt anyone's ears. I just whacked the microphone. I would expect to see inventory in the peak of the season, right? As we head into what we saw last year, and as we head into May, June, many more homes than we see now. And that could be a very interesting thing to see. It could spell a great opportunity for buyers. And it's also interesting that there's so many sellers that have sort of jumped in and decided to cash out. I'd love to get some solid stats on all of those folks on what their plans are, what they're doing. Okay, so next on this list for comparison is new listings. That's the green line. You can see the same basic thing leading up, right? A big jump from December to February. You see the same thing. And you even see that weird little bend in it in terms of trend between January and February that we saw between January and February of this year. And then look, that also tends to increase, and it peaks in May. All of that makes sense in terms of new listings, sellers deciding to sell their home. Because if you're going to sell it, typically you want to list it in May or June so that you're able to take advantage of the peak of the market, when the largest number of buyers are out there because they want to take advantage of the vacation time to move kids, and it's easier, the weather's nicer. All of those things conspire to back up why these numbers go this way. And remember, this peak is not where we are right now. We're down here. So if we expect similar performance, we would expect both of these numbers to end up by May way up there. Huge increases in inventory, which wouldn't surprise me at all. Next, let's talk about total number of homes sold. Now you can see that last year and the year before, so February of 2023 and February of 2024, same thing happens, the same basic trend of an increase in home sales. I would actually say that between 2024 and 2025, it's actually a little bit of a more mild boost in home sales. That looks more steep to me. Leah, you can see that, right? Right there versus right there. Which is also an indicator that we would see at least this blue line continue to go up, right? As we don't sell off the inventory that we currently have in hand. And then let's look at pending. And what we're going to want to figure out is what's its performance compared to past years. So between December to February, we've seen a pretty good increase. We saw the same thing in December of 2023. And we saw the same thing from December to February 2023. So very on par. And if we take that as an indicator of where things are going to go, we would expect to see this continuing to increase and plateauing right around May 24th. And it's interesting to me that the slope here is keeping up so much with what's being listed. Another thing that's likely to be interesting in the data for March and April is going to be the likely increase in days on market. Not because the days on market actually increased, which is, I know, a little contradictory. The reason why we tend to see the days, we'll see an increase in the total number of homes sold, but we'll see an increase in the total number of days on market simply because we're selling off old inventory. We're selling everything that was listed, right? The best in class of what was listed gets sold immediately. Then, if the sales numbers increase, we start to see a sell-off of properties that may have been on the market for longer. So sometimes it's a contradiction, and people don't really grok why we would, when there's an increased level of activity overall in our real estate market, why do days on market go up? And it's because we're selling off older inventory. It's actually a good sign at that point in the market, right? Does that make sense? You've got a bunch of things on a shelf. Nothing is selling. You're tracking how long each one of those things has been on the shelf. Then big sales day comes, and suddenly the days that those were on your shelf is a statistic that jumps, right? Because some of them have been sitting around forever. And so when you get that sell-off period, that's why that number goes up. Just something to keep in mind. Okay, next, let's talk about list price versus sales price. It's always interesting to see where these sort of do their little dance and one goes higher and one goes lower. Right now, we are absolutely above and leaving sales price in terms of average list price, the original list price, what sellers' expectations are. We can see that took a really big jump, and average home sales month to month actually took a very mild jump. And I want you to really note the difference of last year. Now, notice how last year in February, we actually had average sales price drop between January and February, and we had the same thing happen between January and February of 2023. That's kind of interesting in terms of how it defies that sort of trend that we've seen in past years at this time of year. And I can't help wondering if some of this average sales price stuff in terms of increases has to do with simply more activity at higher price points in some of our markets. We'll see how that goes. Where do I expect this to go? Well, if we look at what typically happens after February, there is usually a jump in average sales price. So I would expect to see the same thing. I would expect to see from February to March a jump in average sales price. If we just look at past years, that would be the odds-on bet that that's what's going to happen. All right, so percent of asking price. And the numbers we're at now, look at that. That's just crazy. And that's one reason why I double checked the numbers. But yeah, we've had a ridiculous increase. I expected it to be flat this month. I've been trying to figure out what. Now remember, this data is based on homes that sold in January, right? Because that they accepted an offer in January and then the escrow closed in February. So that we're closing in on the peak of April and May of last year, which is nuts for this time of year. But in terms of what can we expect once we've done February, see here's February of 2024, we actually normally expect this number to ramp up as we move up to April and kind of get to the peak of the season, April and May, right? What do I expect to see happening? I have a very hard time believing that this number is going to ramp up from here. And remember, this is the county number, so this is a higher sample size for us to base our estimates off of. This is just crazy. So I'm not going to bet that it's going to go up from here. Maybe this was a fluke for the month. Maybe it drops back down. I would guess it should be somewhere around here. And then maybe ramp up another bit. But if we see this continuing to ramp up, that would be insane. But given the numbers we've already talked about, I'm not anticipating a drop in inventory or a huge increase in buyers. So the only thing that might be an exception to that, if we saw a big drop in interest rates, that might push a lot more folks into becoming buyers. But as I said before, I think there is an excellent chance that what we end up seeing is that point where inventory grows to outstretch buyer demand. And then that's when we'll start to see numbers like this go down. And I kind of ballpark will be in some version of that this year. But again, we'll have to see upcoming numbers to know for sure. All right, now we're going to take a look at days on market. You can see that we had a dramatic drop in days on market. Now, a dramatic drop in days on market indicates to me that we didn't sell off past inventory, right? Take a look at February. There was a nice little drop from January is when you start to see it, right? So January days on market is indicative of homes that had offers on them in December, these were homes that got sold off, right? Homes that have been on the market longer, and so we see a peak in days on market. And if you look at January of 2023, January of 2024, January 2023, ridiculously mild drop in days on market, pretty good drop in 2024, but our drop was gigantic. That suggests to me that the homes that are selling are only new listings, right? That would have to be true. If we're seeing 18 days or 19 days for a home to get sold, that is almost by definition a new listing, right? It's a brand spanking new listing that hasn't been on the market forever. So I think the buyer demand is tending to focus on the best examples of the homes in each market that get listed that sell quickly, right? So homes with fewer challenges, homes that don't need to be remodeled or be painted, that have great landscaping or are updated and upgraded. So to see a huge drop in days on market like this, I guess it's a good indicator of how fast things are selling right now as related to when they're listed. But it's so much of a drop that it indicates none of the old inventory. We're getting more and more stale inventory accumulating is the between the lines story I get from that piece of data. Next, now let's talk a little bit about, I was almost going to stop tracking this because I was thinking this number was less relative, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think we're starting to see more and more homes. Welcome to whoever just joined us on YouTube. Thanks for spending some Saturday morning quality time with us. I hope you've got a great cup of coffee there to enjoy the stats. So here's the number of listings with reduced prices in February of 2025. Apologies. Yes, that says 2024, but it should say 2025. I apologize. So last month in Santa Clara County, 13% of homes had a price reduction. This month, 13%. So it stayed the same. So January, February, both months, 13%. But it's a 78% increase year over year from last year. So a lot more homes than last year are being subjected to price reductions to garner attention to get sold. San Jose, last month it was 14%. This month it's 15% of homes have a price reduction, and that's a 74% increase from the same time last year. Morgan Hill, and again, remember, these numbers are going to be a little bit more wild because of the small sample size. One home can obviously throw these numbers into a fit. So 19% last year, 6% this year, but it still represents a 150% increase from the same time last year. Gilroy, 13% of homes had a price reduction last month, 15% in February for a 10% increase from the same time last year. And that's something I like to point out about Gilroy. So Gilroy is more affordable. Gilroy seems to be less crazy in terms of expectations. If we look at the expected original list price, they only had a 1.8% increase in the same time last year at 1.36 million. But in terms of average sales price, it was 22% higher than the same time last year. And I think this is a reflection of sellers in the Gilroy market being better calibrated to the realities of the market, which then results in them, and I realize this number of 15% is higher than Morgan Hill, but and it's the same as San Jose. But in terms of how much of a delta there is from the same time last year, Gilroy seems just to be a little bit more connected with what's the right price to list my house at, right? I mean, does that make sense with some of the other data that we've looked at? And I still think Gilroy represents a great opportunity. If you're somebody who sort of doesn't like Gilroy very much, I think you need to consider areas like Northwest and Northeast. Now, if you're someone who has a much higher budget, going Northeast in Gilroy, I think is a great option. That you're going to find little mini estates all over northeastern Gilroy with like 5 acres. I've got several friends who live in that area. A really good friend of my oldest boy, his family lives there. I love that place. I think that's a fantastic neighborhood. And it's, it's one of those areas where you're going to spend more, but you're going to get a whole lot more as well. Now, if you want to buy something at or below the average, you can, and it's a little bit more average price because it's super desirable, but it's where Christopher High School is located in Gilroy. My next door neighbor used to be the principal of Christopher High School. She's awesome. And that school is great. And you can get in there and find all kinds of great opportunities for homes in Northwest Gilroy. I think that's, for my money, in terms of bang for the buck and what you get and beautiful parks and nice neighborhoods and access to school, I think that's probably one of the best places in Gilroy that you could possibly buy. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out. All right, now let's go ahead and hit some newsy things. Where am I at here? That was the MLS. We can look at that if you like, if you want to try to suss out any data. Looks like we got another person on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. All of it should appear to me. I should be able to see it. And I'll be happy to answer anything you want to explore during the stream. So this is an old client of mine, Jeffrey, thank you. He moved up to Redwood City from South San Jose. And I think he's a super happy guy. He loves being closer to the water. And I know he's a what do you call it? It's a surfboard with a sail on it. Sailboarding. He's really good. He took me out after escrow closed on his place, and it almost killed me. So there you go. All right. The headline, as I mentioned at the beginning, California, Illinois, Florida, and New York City area lead housing markets facing greater risk of downturns. And yes, is that a headline that's likely to freak somebody out? Absolutely. But people have to remember that California and Silicon Valley, the broad markets of California and Silicon Valley, are two totally different things. I highlighted something down here. Let me just see here we go. So the 14 California counties that are likely to experience this are Butte, Contra Costa County, which is an interesting one because that's the closest one. El Dorado County. I love El Dorado County. I lived in El Dorado County for a couple of years. Humboldt County. That's where you go to grow your weed, from what I understand. Shasta County, Solano County, in the northern part of the state, plus Fresno County, Kern County, Kings County, Madera County, San Joaquin County, and Stanislaus County in Central California, and San Bernardino, Southern California. No mention of Santa Clara County, and I think rightfully so. I know these areas, but the reason why I mention this is it sounds like, particularly for you, Noel, someone who may be interested in investing in something. I think some of these counties represent an opportunity. They're a little bit more volatile than other markets. I'm not, in terms of investing, I'm not 100% behind the theory that Santa Clara County always makes a lot of sense. For my money, the only stuff that really works in Santa Clara County, if you're an investor, is going to be multifamilies, so duplexes, tris, or quads, or bigger if you want to take on weirdness that comes once you get to 5 units. But these could be openings of opportunity, right? I talk to a lot of investors who are a little bit freaked out about the idea of having out-of-state investments. I mean, and those of you who've followed me for a while, you know I've had property investments in Hawaii. I've had property investments in other states. I'm looking at investing in another state right now. So it's not something I'm terribly worried about. But I do like them to be at least within a certain reasonable distance, which I realize is absolutely stupid, relating to the fact that I owned investment property in Hawaii. But Hawaii, I mean, beachfront property in Hawaii. Well, how could you not invest in that? And in my case, it was until the state decided to come and make it virtually impossible to do. But anyway, I wanted to point that out because I thought that was an interesting one. Was there anything else I highlighted? Here we go. I highlighted this because I thought El Dorado County was interesting in terms of a county where you could potentially find yourself a great deal. And I guess I have a soft spot for El Dorado County, so I guess I got a little built-in bias there. Next, the 10 most expensive states to buy a house in the U.S. Of course, here we are. I thought I'd point this one out since we're right there at the top of the list. California, median sales, and this will blow people away, right? The median sales price in California is $785,000. What was the, and that's the median, right? So the median is the number where if you have a number where half of the numbers are above it and half of the numbers are below it, that's what median means. Average simply means you take all the numbers, you add them up, and you divide it by the number of numbers, and that gives you the average. And the median monthly housing payment, right? Maybe at this point it's good to jump into this. So as I like to do every month, I like to do a quick look at what money is going to cost us to buy a house, right? So let's take $1.52 million as the average price in Morgan Hill. That's the zip code for Morgan Hill. That's the price, assuming you're putting down $20,000. The best deal you could get right now, at least from this search tool, and Bankrate's pretty good, with $304,000 down. It just blows me away. Optimum First Mortgage will give you a mortgage of $7,291 a month at 6.184 APR. Now, let's make sure not to forget the upfront costs. To get that payment, you have to pay $23,000 in points, processing, and underwriting, and loan document preparation. $23,688. Crazy, right? This one's worse, $24,000. Then we drop down to $15,000, but now your payment jumps up to $7,600. Those are some crazy numbers. The one thing I like about this tool, if you decide you want to use this tool, this Bankrate search tool, and you want to get a vacation home or a secondary home, that's what you want to do. And you can see that we lose about, here it's plus 2.25 and plus whatever. Now it's at 6.436. What was it before? 6.184. So yeah, so about 0.3 delta there between the two, which isn't horrible. But anyway, so this is not a cheap option, right? This is like very expensive housing, and particularly since we know our average was $1,520,000. But this is the average for the state. So there's tons of other markets that are far less expensive for you to potentially get into in the state of California. Next on the list was Hawaii, where the median sales price is $779,000. And I just sold my Hawaiian property in 2024. In fact, I believe it closed 1 year ago tomorrow, because it was the middle of March when that thing finally sold. But anyway. And then next is Massachusetts, then Colorado, then Washington, then New York, then Utah. Utah is very interesting. I have had an up in terms of the number of folks who I talk to who are interested in selling their home. Utah is now on that list on a regular basis. Idaho was there for a while. I had several folks in kind of a sprint, people who didn't know each other, in a chunk, all say they're going to Idaho. Still the usual number of folks typically saying they're going to Texas. Fewer people saying they're going to Florida. But Utah and Tennessee have become more common stated destinations for folks I've talked to who are looking to list their home. Next is Montana. So I like Montana. I think Montana is great. I've had people tell me that the wind always blows in the same direction and people go crazy because of that. I don't know if that's true or not. It seems like an interesting story. New Jersey, I don't know why. I'm not gonna get into it. Oregon, beautiful coastal stuff in Oregon. I've done a few road trips up the Oregon coast, and it's really spectacular. But there's the whole list there. And we can scroll down to sort of the cheapest: Iowa, Ohio, Oklahoma, Michigan. Yeah, all good stuff. All right, weekly mortgage demand surges 11% higher as interest rates dropped for the sixth straight week. This is from the 12th, so just 3 days ago. Average contract interest rate for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage with conforming loan balances, $806,000 or less, decreased to 6.67. And you can see that on this, we're already seeing in a non-conforming, we're seeing lower interest rates than that. Let's see. Weekly housing trends, just so we can sort of compare and contrast. Let me go down to the little graphic they always do. Oh, didn't do the graphic this time. Let's see here. So you can see median listing prices are down across the board. New listings are up, just as ours are. But our new listings is, if we look at our data just for Santa Clara County, new listings are up 46%, and new listings are only up nationally 8.3%. If we look at total active listings, it's 27.8% higher. And year to date is kind of the one we want to look at. The week ending stuff is silly. 26.2%, new listings up 5%. We're up 60% in terms of active listings in our county. And median list prices are not down. They are up anywhere from 1.7% up to 7.7%. So we definitely deviate from what's going on there. Now, as I mentioned, I am a licensed real estate broker and realtor. This is my website, soldbyrobert.com. If you'd like, you can come and right here on the front page, soldbyrobert.com, you can simply enter your address and you will get an instant home valuation. You don't have to give me your email address. You don't have to do any of those silly things. You just get the data. But if you want access to a great tool that will give you an update every month on what your home is worth, this is a great tool for doing that. Now, one of the things I've always suggested to my clients is at least once a year, do a quick review. Do a review of your home value, what your loan situation is. This tool does all this stuff for you automatically, and it gives you that update monthly, because I think just knowledge is power. But this thing has obviously the home value estimator. But if you want the rest of these tools, you can just provide your email address, and every month you're going to get an update with an updated home value estimate, plus a home equity tool to customize your home equity, home purchase options if you want to invest or buy something else, or you want to invest in something, refinance calculator. Does it make sense to refinance? And then you can see that it's in red here indicating no, it's not. And what's great about this is I partnered with a local lender who you can simply click on this and get real world data immediately and figure out if it's something that you want to do. You can get a mortgage summary, explore your options, discover net worth, and do some pretend numbers on renting your property. If you wanted to do a VRBO thing, how much money could, and you only wanted to do it 2 weeks out of every month, how much would you make? If you wanted to rent your home full time, how much could you make on that, and what would that income look like? So some great tools here. Feel free to check those out if you're into it. We already talked about interest rates, so I won't go there. If you've got any questions, this is the time. This is a great opportunity for us to look at kind of any dimension of anything you're interested in relating to data. And this is nationwide data, but here's one thing I want to show you. This is the home price forecast, and this is something that's put together by the folks at ReVenture. Let's look at it monthly. But you can see that, according to them, we're right at the 50% mark. We're right at 50, meaning that we're straddling between a buyer's market and a seller's market in terms of their forecast, right? We can see that in terms of the forecast, they've been wrong before, where they figured, oh, wow, the future is going to be this, and then we ended up with this. But this is where they think things are going to be. That it's going to be much more of a buyer's market. Now, we'll see. You and I have just explored some very interesting numbers relating to our local market that I think we haven't seen the numbers like this in a very long time, that definitely lean into suggesting more of a buyer's market. If more buyers get enticed into the market through interest rates, that obviously could change. But at the rate at which we're adding homes to the inventory, I think it's a super interesting time and potentially a really big change. Looks like someone just joined us on Facebook. Thank you very much. Feel free to ask any questions you might have in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on the chat, and I'm happy to explore anything that you might be interested in. But that's it for that. In terms of investor home price and affordability, we've got the home value numbers, and look at that. Just this is Zillow Home Value Index. So this is number provided by Zillow, and we can show the fair home value, and this is the fair home value, and this is where we're at. Obviously, if we consider their estimation of a fair home value to be correct, you want this green number to be at or below, right? What homes are selling for. And we've been there, but it was all the way back in 2012 up to 2015. That was such an amazing window of opportunity for so many folks. And I get that it was also horrible. There was an awful lot of heartbreak that went on for folks who simply couldn't make ends meet and had to leave their home or get foreclosed on. But for other folks, it was an opportunity. I got an awful lot of families and other folks into some amazing properties during this time frame. I think my biggest regret is I didn't buy enough myself during this time frame. But anyway, okay. That hits just about everything I wanted to hit today. I'm not seeing any questions pop up about any data. Again, we can totally look this. We can do the whole country and the whole state. So if anyone's interested in having a discussion or sort of putting heads together on what numbers are looking like in different areas, clearly I've got the tool here that can help us make some informed decisions. All right, everyone. Well, I think that's about it. We've had another fantastic third Saturday of the month to explore what's going on in local real estate here in Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy. Again, my name's Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in Santa Clara County and realtor. Been doing it since 1988. If you have any questions, ideas, goals in the wonderful world of real estate, I'm here to help you achieve them. So feel free to reach out to me at soldbyrobert.com. Thanks again for joining me, folks.